Tenga Tamba Yonti, Gendu Lion, Dodging, Mama Mera, Chujaka, Hambo Trapa Javan, Kajulamang, the woman, Chicken, Japan, the Ransom Jogong to Tozepa, Lumi Jolo, the Soto Majala, Chuchi, not only Monjoa Gila, so some you don't know the dungeon or Tamba Chujin, the Zato. The Pepe, Gandinaba, Samatani, Tarbo Karima, Jalure, Titi Chusakawa, Chupala, Sun and Padme by Wosom. In my life, somebody just when I'm got taller, she got taught. They tell her Tony, Son and Padme by Yori, teaching about the river to GCS.
Di mare di mare di korang chedores ambaja tira di korang chedores di ngarang chedores can you adjust it?
Yeah,
so when he sits straight and it's at his mouth, he doesn't go up. First of all, my Dharma friends and all the Sangha who has come here today, the Shidele. Many of you came from far away and also endured many difficulties to come here. And actually, Milarepa and so on have said that if you endure hardships for the sake of Dharma, that is actually an inconceivable merit. So we speak about two accumulations. There is the cause of the accumulation of merit, and the result is the accumulation of wisdom. So to accumulate these two accumulations, that is actually an incredible, inconceivable merit. Kasakani, Kachimambo, Yantang, Yang, the future Samodana, they come to Tondam, they want to serve the Tondam, the same to not serve the Trisamodan, the Kanichi Chipari, those Hako to Guyore, the same Yaro, So today we are receiving instructions on the Gangama, the instructions on Mahamudra, and this is Upadesha, or a Pith instruction. And so a Pith instruction, being that it probably is not to be explained from just word per word from the beginning to the end. And in any case, it is something that I have explained extensively before to the best of my abilities. But so now, in general, this term here, Pith instruction, Upadesha, now there are three names that we give. We call the ultimate truth. We call it Mahamudra, Dzogchen, or the Madhyamaka, the middle way. So there are three names that we call the ultimate truth. And it is said that when you know the basis of those names, when you know what they really are, then there is actually no more view. So this term Upadesham, a Pith instruction. Here it is the Pith instruction of Mahamudra, so the Sanskrit term is Upadesham, and now we have received instructions, teachings on that all over the place again and again, and now we understand what the essence of that really means. So it points to the ultimate truth. It all gathers in the ultimate truth, and the ultimate truth really is the mind itself. It gathers in the mind. And so this is how we can understand that all of these different names that describing the ultimate truth really have the same essence. So that is an outer way of describing this term Pith instruction or Upadesham.
명아시바다 강이 동 가르치고서 깔리 잡아고 통토바 제타버를 명아시고요. 그때 명아다 동 가르 통토버래지나 제타당 소탐지래 너나 잡을 로기요래 답치로 기침으로니 대화도 탑 동네 방탑 대 코나를 뭐여 대리 지과 요말 세들 대화도 동네니요래 그 대회는 되다 체디 동네 타버터는 지기 뭐주 체가 제례저 동네 탈마 타와 되는데 조이트들이 하고도 바라들이 답치로 탐지 그래지 설르게 동네 타지 바라다 서바츠 딜낭 설르게 동네 강이 요건 낭 세부 처럼은 요거 있었대 때라 뜻이 동네 강이 요거도 좀 사지가 대하고는 동네 탐지 대화 좀 공을 셈이지 동네 좀 공을 셈이지 그때 셈고 내려오는 통로 그는 타토고 동네 보고요 해서 그래 사자치 보고 셈도 따고요 소시랑 셈도 내려오고 그러더니 되게 셈 통명을 해서
And so what is really the meaning of this term Pith instruction or Upadesham? The Pith is called a Pith instruction because when you understand this instruction, it is a way to understand the ultimate meaning, to see the ultimate meaning without too much difficulty. So what meaning is to be seen here actually? What do we see? What do we actually find out in the end? So now, first in the world, there are basically two different traditions. There is the tradition of the Holy Dharma or the spiritual traditions, and then there is the mundane, the worldly traditions. And all of these traditions are nothing else but ways to find happiness and ways to avoid suffering. That is really the single common goal of all the different traditions in the world. And so now from a worldly perspective, we try to find happiness in this life, and we try to avoid suffering in this life. And to achieve that, the various sciences and different worldly traditions have developed. But then, although they can give us some comforts, they cannot really entirely liberate us from suffering. And that is why there's also a tradition of the Holy Dharma or the spiritual traditions. So in the Holy Dharma, we then learn that the only way to become liberated from suffering is if we avoid the causes of suffering. And so first of all, we normally, people who more focus on the outer world, the outer appearance of the world, they more try to avoid suffering on a physical level. And so then the suffering that we experience in our bodies, if you really actually look carefully, then you will find that even though the suffering is experienced on a physical level, it really actually is within the mind. And that is one thing that the Buddha had realized. He realized that the source of everything is the mind. The source of all happiness is the mind, and the source of all suffering, everything is the source of the mind. And so that is the meaning that we can understand when we understand Mahamudra. And so when we realize Mahamudra, through the practice of Mahamudra, we observe our mind, we look at our mind, and then the instructions, the Pith instructions, are instructions that help you then see, realize the natural state of your own mind.
Sem ton kai pegre jena tani sem ton na to par hi chi bala sa sa lo par chi ba kang ni je par chi ba dong ni za ni me ba je yo le chi dong ni me ba de chi mo le chi a ta ti su non chi mo me chi le pe na ti ta ti pe sha kang ni me na o ta ko ti su nam le la ko yo le ti dong ni me ba ti su nam la ko yo le Terus musuh jadi pas suku kasih nanti dungi meni yoga mari deh dong jumari. Saji sih wak kompak thon nanti, rang dungi le troli masih ji thamci trol tapi dungi cawan ni dia cibo cibo deh saji itu. Oh tu sunam cibori, ni dia tahu ni sunam cibori. Ni saji itu dia hakona, saji tahu itu dia hakona. Wah, me betul sunam cibori dia hakoni. Oh dia tahu sunam cibori dia. Dia hajar cuma saji cibori dia. Dia seri dia. Dia sosok dia dia. Paling hiji bala saksa lo tu. Cek tambo tu tunggu dia. Saji orang kesian dia dia tu tunggu.
So then what's really the benefit of seeing one's own mind? Here in the very beginning it says, homage to glorious co-emergence. And so what is this glorious here? Glorious here, it refers to that state that is completely free of all suffering. It is the state of great bliss that is free of all suffering. And that is what we call glorious. Glorious also means endowed with great merit. For example, in an ordinary sense, sometimes we call people, we say that, oh, this person has a lot of merit. For example, if that person doesn't have any financial difficulties, then we say that this person has a lot of merit. And so what we identify as being endowed with merit is an absence of suffering. But in this world, no matter how wealthy one might be, one will not be able to avoid suffering entirely. So we experience really always both happiness and suffering. And when you attain the state of enlightenment, then you are completely free from all suffering, and also you are able to liberate others from suffering. So at the state of enlightenment, there is no more suffering at all, and that is a great merit, a great glory. So if you understand the qualities of Buddha, then you understand how precious this state actually is and what a great merit it is. And so who has that merit? Actually, you have it yourself too. And that is actually revealed in this very first line here in this text, homage to glorious co-emergence. It co-emerges with you. So you have it within you. Your own mind is actually the Buddha.
Then come to come to Bandi, Saja Chiboti, which got you no matter what long as you got the shooting that so this is Sanji, she was pass a year till Tona Yomaris, Ponju Maris, Trump Semta, Teltini, Tela Semtajiti Antony. Kapti hindu chakwa taka chibo iba haa kore te churu chibo ma jina natang tong toku ma e song te naro ba churu tina dikanda usi na.
So then it says, the next line says, even though Mahamudra cannot be explained, wise Naropa, you have accepted suffering and endured hardships with devotion to the Guru. So take this to heart, you fortunate one. So now what we call the Buddha is something, a state that you cannot see if you're looking outward in the outer world. You cannot see the Buddha there. To see the Buddha, you have to look at your own mind. And then to be able to see that, that requires great hardship. It requires great perseverance and diligence in practice. Having understood the preciousness of that, then one is able to accept difficulties and endure hardships like Naropa. And so therefore, Tilopa says, it is suitable to explain these teachings to you, Naropa.
지각이 봐디 지혼 직디 출래를 또서 따면서 점만함지 말만하지 마도나 요마이 진짜 좋아지는 직진 사와 통송 지각 뒤도다 가리지 몇지 강원 세디지 본 적성사들이 뒤도다들이 또 그냥 좋은 이다고 메시 근데 차정신이 손들이 세서봐 속은 사비 시요 말이 뒤뒤 동이지 조금 말이 내가 충충 그 차는 동이 망보도 로고 때 하고요 말이 당시 동이지 하고고 그랬지 가와서는 동이 봐
So then the next line says, alas, look closely at worldly phenomena, like dreams and illusions that cannot last. Dreams and illusions do not actually exist. Therefore, renounce them and relinquish worldly activities. So now, our entire life, we only really care about this life. And we mostly just feel that as long as I can provide for this life, that's sufficient. Nothing else is needed. I have no need for the Dharma or anything else. So with that state of mind, we are attached to the various pleasures of this life, and we do not even think about future lives at all. And we are unaware of the suffering that is actually present. We are attached to the slightest pleasures that actually create a lot of misery, but we don't understand that. So therefore, in the beginning first, it is important to understand suffering. So basically, wherever you go, there is only suffering.
제 말함지 마다가 하고 거래지 가리지 나와 생도 타지 생이 동물 타지는 세디서 왔으면 석시에도 생구지가도 당호대 하고 생들이 유무 받을 동에서 요 하고 그런 로아를 누르는 유무가 똑같이요 하고 무슨 받이 때문에라 말이잖아 우리만 열어요래 꼬라자도래 고도 내가 요 말이 별도로 미성소제 심지어도 내가도 저도 가지 저도 자와가 세고 유모가 대인저 도당들이 세대 연대 저도 나와 생고 땅 배나 로디 주민원들이 로디 오들이 대 로컬 잡아 가도티 산도도 대다고 하고는 세고 저도도 이 동에 막고는 대화 생겨서 동네 생겨서도 이제 하고 저기 대건 사망문이 말이지 대한문이 말이 동행문이 말이 놓쳐버릴 때 하고
Phenomena are like a dream or like an illusion. And so we need to understand that this entire life is just like a dream. So to understand that, we first resolve that appearances are the mind, and then that mind itself is emptiness. And so who actually engages in all of the worldly activities? It is the mind that is engaging in all of these activities. So that's the first thing to understand. And then when you look at the mind, you see that it is that mind, those afflictive emotions in the mind, that creates all suffering. The 6 afflictive emotions create the suffering in the 6 realms of samsara. And then these forms of suffering actually manifest. So do these really exist, and how do they exist? Actually, it arises, but it always changes. Nothing ever stays the way it is. And for example, when you look at a poisonous snake or any other sentient being in the 3 lower realms, that is how they are momentarily, but they will not always be like that. It always changes. And it changes because our mind changes. The afflictive emotions in our mind transform, they change. And depending on the change in our mind, state of mind, the outer environment, the outer appearances also change together with that. For example, if you have a light source, like a lamp, then wherever you shine the lamp on, that kind of color of that object will appear. So if you shine it on a certain object, that object will appear. So if you understand that, you know that everything is really the mind, and the mind constantly changes. So happiness and suffering is all created by the mind. And then you realize that actually, therefore, nothing really exists. Nothing is real. Happiness, pleasure is not real, and suffering is also not real. So this is the illusory nature of all appearances.
차당경으로 생분 내려오는 통고를 떠반다고래 세트때서 가축종리 지와 마법이 있어버리 지와 체력 마법이 있어버리 세트 집어 좋잖아 체력 마법 나도 아고서
So then, now you have to really think about now when you, as you try to, engage in mundane activities, will you actually ever be able to achieve the perfect happiness that you are striving for? And actually, you will not ever achieve that. That is because you have no freedom, you have no control over it at all. So all striving really is not so fruitful. What's really determining all the outcome is your own karma. So here in the beginning, we need to develop trust in karma, to understand the causes. That is very important. So everything really is determined by that, and it is not determined by the efforts and the hard work that we put into all our activities. Everything follows the law of karma. And so then here it says, renounce all of these activities and relinquish worldly activities. And so in this life, as you engage in your activities, you do not have any control over what will happen. So if you reflect on karma, then you will also begin to consider not just this, but also future lives. So giving up worldly activities, then now what is the fault? All the faults, all the mistakes, where do they come from? They all basically come from our attachment and our aversion. And for as long as these states of mind are present, they are like clouds that will prevent us from seeing our true nature. So the worldly activities of this life are actually not so important. What's more important are our future lives. It is important to consider in the long term, because often for the sake of this life, what we really create is us being lost in all future lives.
차당이야 속침부나 차과 속치는 진 저런 차로래 차와 속들 색로래 배나 그때는 받으면 대녀 강용인 걸 가리 다니 밤에 발에서 저와를 챈들라 저와를 다니는 이 다른 전류요래 서로 열자치고 말이죠 난 세고들이 차당 되겠네 받지 못하고 서로 열탕이 지막다래 전도래 마다 발에 낭sem도 차당 맞지 탑재고도
So when attachment is predominant, when there's strong attachment, the mind becomes like a block of ice. And hatred or anger is like fire, it burns you. And so in reality, there is no real enemy or friend. And actually, even in this life, it is uncertain who is really your enemy and your friend. And it always changes, even in this life. Your friend may become your enemy, and your enemy your friend. So all the outer objects, the appearances of this life are not important. What's important is your mind, your state of mind. It is important to recognize that it is those thoughts of attachment and aversion that cause all the harm. And so actually all the outer appearances of this life are like illusions. They constantly change. They are impermanent. So you can't change them. What you need to change is your inner state of mind. You need to eliminate those thoughts of attachment and aversion from your mind.
차당 도바들 때네 동해 주와 하고 요리 다들 동해 탐지 차당이 주와래 마음바라 코스 요리 대중치 보러 도네 이런 상게 유모 같이 좀 거로 쳤대는 서로 예를 들면 뭐 갈게나 생때 공사제는 예나양 이 차당이 가져도 되게 되게 줘도 하거나 다 생문에 가려래 que por nada era tudo para sempre tudo isso só sempre tem na tudo para gob me para não ter valor gob de 직장 영어랑 selbst다 다 고사다 다 탐지랑 selbst다 그래 때문에 나도 뭐 그래 gob me para 내 par치서 gob de eu sempre 랑 sempre 다 그래
And then, having cut through the bonds of attachment and aversion to people and places, meditate alone in forests and mountain retreats. Remain there in a natural state of non-meditation. So, first you have recognized that all suffering is created by attachment and aversion. And so you recognize now that all the suffering you experience in this life is created by those afflictive emotions. And it is those afflictive emotions that will create all the suffering in the future. So first you recognize the great fault in these afflictive emotions. And then you make an effort to eliminate, to rid your mind of these afflictive emotions without paying much attention to what happens on the outer level. No matter what other people do and so on, you need to get rid of your own afflictions. So even though your mind is actually the Buddha, it is temporarily covered by this sheet of ice, obscured. And so then what is the mind now really? So you meditate in a natural state of non-meditation. So look at your own mind, and that is the state of non-meditation, where you just mind looks at itself. So here at this point we come to the beginning of the actual meditation of how to practice. So here you should then look at your mind. And when you first look at your mind, you will see many thoughts in the mind. So meditation here is that the mind must look at itself, view itself.
Marty tell the Tera, not all the Baga, Manga, Martin Sounds, not both somebody, so Hakon, Shimkin Shibate, Hakon, Shimkin Shibate, Tapate, not only because the same Nakana, you get a child with your there is some little Sarah in a Tomani, judgeable, same now the money, Maran said, Nakana, you pay judgeable. They don't buy me more that meant that for your money. Oh, send Nakana, you did. They don't have over it.
And so as you meditate and you look at your mind, then sometimes it happens that all thoughts disappear. So all the thoughts have stopped and no other thought, no thought of the future has yet arisen. And sometimes you glimpse the mind in between those thoughts. So those thoughts are not the mind, are not your real natural state. The thoughts go, and when there is no thoughts, what always remains is this clear awareness that knows. And that clear awareness is like space. So sometimes when all thoughts have stopped, in an instant, even if just for a moment, you may see this vast space-like nature of the mind. And that is the real mind to be seen, the actual nature of the mind. It is clear and it is empty. That clarity is empty. It is vast. So it is no longer this small, solid entity of an eye. It is very vast, like the sky. And that is your true state, your true nature. And that nature, because it is empty, it cannot be given a name. So the nature of the mind that you will then understand, that you will realize, is this vast space-like nature.
To the Tongi, the Marjosen, Napana, the machine, the dying thing of what's a machine. Tadichada, they are sitting here, don't eat it down. They are Chani, they are to talk on Mary, nor do the same COVID is you born me better on them, you bought to so. Hold the Kawasana doing order to me, Mr. Chicken with the watch. Tatil Lodona to go Lord Jungle Machina, Titil Shell of Sanctuary, Titan Hako to your Hako, the critical Torare, the young town, young to call Shiva, Kadicha, the young town to Kiori, Benata Jonji, the Jim. Said she didn't what I do, you go out of Lord Mitachimo, got to the teaching, did you say with a simple child, station to warm me better on 1942, or course, I don't even have the hard corner, the young thing I did in the younger lot, don't go there.
So then, so these worldly affairs are like a meaningless cause of suffering, and you should rather look at the essence of the ultimate meaning. So these worldly affairs is that we engage in these worldly affairs with this fixation, this belief in dualistic existence of self and other. And because of this dualistic grasping, we are attached to pleasure, and we try to avoid all suffering. We are attached even to the slightest pleasure, and we never recognize suffering. So that mind is what creates the 6 realms of samsara, and all of that has no essence. All of these activities here have no essence. No matter where you go in the 6 realms of samsara, you will only find suffering and nothing else. There is no happiness to be found. A person who has already trained in the 4 thoughts that turn the mind will instantly, upon hearing that, will instantly know that, understand that. And that understanding is this instant feeling that arises, an instant feeling arises. And so that is something you really have to reflect on again and again. For example, reflect on the difficulty of finding a precious human birth. that is the antidote to the attachment to this life and so on. There's various, or it inspires us to strive and so forth. So when you meditate here at this point, the moment you think of that, the moment you bring this, what you have trained in the four thoughts that turn the mind, this mind of renunciation, the moment you remember that, your mind will become very relaxed. Then that is because you have understood that all of these worldly samsaric activities are only have the nature of suffering and nothing else. So that's mind of renunciation. That is something that you really have to train your mind in, reflect upon again and again.
호르는 고라장도 고라 정리돼 서래야지.甚至 당시 상진 생코 동반이는 딱 고라장이니까 리려온 것도 고라장지지 다다다 다인이 내 코를 나에서 다인이 차도 이 석주성 그 생구주성지 생구대 생구내로도 절 마시네 다인이 생내로 맛이 썰릴 때 되는 도와를 놓쳐서도 뉴모부터 고원다 도와로 생구주성지 대주성 같은 일단 내가 단 처럼 나지 쳐요 다 고라잖아 다 동네 정도 요리 처럼 동나지 텔상 같은 고와도 생구주성 고와 동네는 또 홍도 그래야 생구주야스 생대 뉴모부와 손에 디 나처럼도 자티메도 그런 상황에 왔다 차도 하고 근데 생대 뉴모부와 막셔서 탑 생활을 하시는 동의만 없어. 오 뉴모부터 제나더니 저도 사탄제 소는 남들까지 소리 변나 좀 잡고 차한 거리 되나지 너는 생활을 하시죠. 저때 저기 버리죠. 너무 생활을 하시지 하고 그랬더니 때까지 버리셔서
And so then when we speak of like wandering in samsara, that we are going around in circles in samsara. So who actually is going around in circles in samsara? Because we say that if sentient beings are Buddhas, who is it then really that goes around in circles? Sentient beings go around in circles because they believe in the existence of a self-other duality. We believe that this is him and that's me and so on. And so who has created that kind of perception? That was created by the mind. And we create such a perception because we do not understand, we do not see the true nature of the mind as it is. And not knowing our true nature, we are projecting outward and are focused on our physical body. And because of that, we constantly are controlled by the 6 afflictive emotions, and then they lead to wandering in the 6 realms of samsara. So it is created by the mind, and temporarily the mind is like an ice block. Even though the ice actually is water by nature, it appears like a rock temporarily, and that block of ice is what goes around and circles around in samsara. So reflecting on that, you realize that it is the mind, it is my mind that has created samsara, and the suffering of samsara is real. I can see it, I can feel it, but it is created by the mind. And we create it with a mind that is constantly controlled by the afflictive emotions. So the mind is like an ice block, and those afflictive emotions are like the seeds that will lead to the growing of a flower, which is the different realms of samsara. So understanding all of that, we will then try to find a method to not be controlled by those afflictive emotions. So within the natural state of the mind, there is actually no affliction, no suffering. It is like water. But then we add earth and so on to the water, and it becomes like a thick mud, and we cannot see the nature of the mind. So that is important to understand in the beginning in order to be able to see the nature of mind.
취재 동담 버티서 당은에 동담 뭐 다도요나 다고 당 통고선 다 동양 로이시죠 로데 도움 동세 버치지 삼이 동 말해 로데 삼이 동데 톰도나 신 대조를 빠지오죠 통고선 로드게 좀 동양 일이 요마 로 그런 다고 그랬지 로 그런 따라 단들이 생각도 못을 다시 따고 삼배지가에 서로 이제 따고 좀 시바데 나도 탐지 통거리 나도 탐지 통나 나도 탐지 조로도 통치 시바 그런 싸워대도 통치 시바 싸워 될다고 그랬지 통치 그런 때는 통치도 이해는 통고 사람 토양이 말이 로텔라 첫때를 라비 야야더니 로데 동사미로 제초로 제초들 아니 다다다 단대 고자고 다들 자시부 가는 조금 하나 semla 책도 다 책이 이름도 접한 참자 다 로컬이 다른 새로 따고 선로인들이 샤스 대장도 새로 따 되게 따고 그러더니 잠을 안 나는 대처치 들리지를 전적이 좀 많이 했더니 대체라더니 다다 전적이 좀 많이 이게 저기 좀 많이 다 이게 막 어찌요래 뭐 sem서때리 semsol할 없어 따라 로컬랑 따고 상기 시바테리 코레에서 미팅 거예요. 베라 대바요래 망과요래 다다요래 양도여도 되는 코자를 믿으러 말이 텔레트리 직진소 부분성들이 내 세부 내려오시는 사실 잘 맞는 거였어. 잘 맞는 사실 걸 시바대 시럽대. 땅으로 다다 때지 시대도 좋아 신경 시바드 자시 버리샤지 시바드 답벌야 파스 살로마 뭐 시바드 답벌잖아 대피 막아리도 내는 또 상보는 이발이 하고 요래 되는 이 지선 마장와 삼바도 이게 지선 장도봐 내 당불가로 대고 애들이 재미에 재미에 지는 상이 요래지
It says, look at the essence of the ultimate meaning. And that is the intellect cannot see the truth of what is beyond the mind. So now after this you feel that I want to see it. I want to see my ultimate, my true nature. So you think then I have to look at it. I have to see my true nature. But then the intellect cannot see the truth of what's beyond the mind. You will not find the truth beyond action by means of deliberate action. So you have this mind, you think that I want to see it. And that's the one you need to look at. The one who thinks that mind is what you need to look at. Do not look at it, do not try to find it anywhere else. It's not like looking at an object. So first you see thoughts and the thoughts go away. But then this awareness, there is this clear awareness that has recognized the thoughts and now the thoughts are gone and that awareness is still here. So that's the one that you need to see, that you need to recognize. And it is not that it is not that there is like someone who sees something. There is no real object actually to be seen. There is just clear awareness, and that needs to be recognized. So that is to recognize what the ultimate meaning here. So here actually we need to meditate. We cannot really understand it only by relying on words and commentary and so on. We need to look at the mind. So look at your mind and look at the one, that mind that thinks, I want to see the nature of my mind. Look at that one, the one who thinks that. And so we can practice that for a while, and then also later maybe you can ask your questions about the experiences that you have had. actually, when it comes to meditation, then we cannot only focus on words and books and so on, but we need to gain an actual experience by looking at the mind. A real feeling and experience must arise. And it arises now when you look at your mind and you recognize that one, the one who thinks all of that. And that one, that awareness has always been there. It's here right now, and it has always been there, and it will always be there. There is no way that it will ever cease to be. It will always be there. It can never disappear. Lord Jigten Sumgön has said, when you know the nature of your mind, you realize that you have actually never separated from the Buddha. So that Buddha within yourself, that is this clear knowing awareness. And it is the one that recognizes, that feels everything. It is the one that experiences all the pleasure, all the happiness, and that experiences all the pain, all the suffering. So that one you need to recognize and then sustain. And then now, when you sustain awareness, the benefit of that is that you will recognize all of the thoughts arising in your mind, positive or negative. And then you, with awareness, you will not pursue the negative thoughts, and you will be able to hold on to those positive thoughts of love and compassion. So actually, as a beginning practitioner, this is how we should practice. We need to hold on to these positive, wholesome thoughts of love and compassion. That is the mind of the four immeasurables.
Untitled Chapter this gom nangni rasi zhe chu zhe ba ji ber shos zhe chu zhe ta sim zao kar ta xi bi xi ba de le ta la cha le都不怎么确实当时就到地方的这出些我的看的都会有嘛，那多忙活用过有的，开始用过有嘛的，开始打杂的用过的，开始那多忙活用过的，那多忙活用上蛮容易习惯的，那多用了，那多几十万张，我那多人没许多，没许多，他到俺家的，我在俺着，俺的，俺那块家的。你还好送哦，这那么多人还好送，还好嘛？他的希望可能的，在看那么多嘛，他希望可能吃到当空的，这第二空，这第还好送了，老板那么当空，那么这个空呢？哦，这那么多，希望可能托送进来，把这投票是吧？是我接着说的，那多的都老着我的，那多都老嘛，接着了都的，都老他妈比接着的我的，谁会都老比个人的。
And so then here actually we should really meditate for a little while. So it says here to know what is beyond both mind and effort, cut through the root of your mind and rest in naked awareness. Cutting through the root of the mind is, we mentioned that just before, you need to sustain and recognize this clear awareness that recognizes, experiences everything. And then sometimes there is, for some, it is, some people, when they meditate, they are just not able to stay still single-pointedly. They have a lot of thoughts. And then for others, for them it is more easy to just stay in a tranquil state without thoughts. But whatever is the case, it doesn't really matter. Whether there are thoughts or not, it actually makes no difference. Even if there are thoughts, just do not pursue those thoughts. Just recognize them. So first there is this perception of I and I know those thoughts. There's this perception of I am the one who is experiencing all of that. I know that there is thoughts and so on. So there is an awareness of I know that this is a thought. And so this is the first recognition. So then just look at your mind, look at this awareness, the one who that really is, that recognizes all those thoughts. We meditate on that for about a minute or so, and after we are done, then you can raise your hand if you have recognized that clear awareness that recognizes all of those thoughts. So what we need to find here is awareness. So it says you cut through the root of the mind and you rest in naked awareness. So naked because your thoughts are like the clothes that you wear. And so here you're taking off all the clothes and you sit here naked meditating. And so here we are talking about taking off the clothes of the mind. And so now when you meditate, while you meditate, you have to let go of all thoughts, virtuous or non-virtuous. So first we have developed love and compassion and we rest in that mind, but then when you meditate, then you let go of all thoughts. That is, you recognize the equal nature of everything, of happiness and suffering and so on. Everything becomes all the same. And also, you don't have to actually think that I want to get rid of it, I want to let go of it. Don't even think about that. If thoughts arise, see them, and then see the one who sees them. Look at the one, who is the one experiencing those thoughts. So with each thought, each emotion that arises, see the one who sees that thought and emotion arising, and just look at that one when you meditate. So did you find that awareness that recognizes all those thoughts? Can you raise your hand if you did?
Kashi sala jata kurma ne thoma zong kui tere shiwa tegi ta ne thoma zong sang teta yore.
So some of you did not raise your hands because maybe you thought I have not found it, but that's the one who thinks I have not found it. That's the one, and that's the one that you need to see. So when you think that I have not seen it, I have not found it, actually it is just that you doubt that you have found it. And this doubt is the subtle obscuration to omniscience. And that is always there. You're always not sure. You always think that that's not what it is. And so we always doubt. And among the 7 concepts of ignorance, doubt is really the ultimate one. Also, it corresponds to the Mara or the demon of self-conceit in the church teachings. So there is this doubt where where you think that that can't be it. I have not seen it. I have not seen my mind. Actually, the mind is always here. That one is always there. It's the one who engages in all those activities. If that one would not be here, you would not engage. There would be no activities to engage in. And so it's that one that's always there, that engages in all of the activities. And it's that one that thinks, I have not seen it, I have not found it. It's that one that doubts whether or not it is it. So that is the one that you need to look at. And when thoughts arise, that's the one that recognizes all the thoughts. And it is enough to just recognize the thoughts if you don't pursue them, you don't follow them. So that one is always there, something that's always there, right? So that's the one that you need to look at. So basically, you remain within the state of that thinks, I have not found it. So without following that thought, just remain within that state.
Top song something Shibatia, top song something there, not story, top mazon something there, not story. You are Rasara, Yoker Rasaya, Bamlang Mela Saja Chibotor, oh, top of Chris of Shibatia Pomadu, top song something Shibaya Pondo, Masa. You are not only Pai Chayana, the Gigi, Jackson, but don't song, some of this and the with all the sometimes the Bakarian, the Shipaso, younger thing around here, the younger. When Namka the Kanya do or my Tribayo made it in Namka Thomas of the Shipper. Oh, Shiba crossed out that day or it is what Namka or it, tell you she, the date or it.
So you're not affirming or negating or accepting and rejecting whatever arises. So that mind that thinks I have found it, that actually is also just a thought. and so is the mind that thinks I have not found it. So they both are just thoughts, and you need to let them both settle in their natural state, let them all dissolve on their own, without accepting or rejecting anything. So don't think that this mind that thinks I have found it, don't think that that's a good state, and don't think that the mind that thinks I have not found it, that that's a bad state of mind. They're both the same in being thoughts, concepts in the mind, and you have to let go of both of those concepts. And letting go of all thoughts, of all concepts, then you just come to abide in a state that is where there is no concept at all, that is completely empty. And first, it is just for a very short while that you come to the actual natural state of the mind itself. Sometimes it just happens naturally when you are not fixating on anything, and the mind just remains in a very clear, empty state. Then often, naturally, you come to this state for a very short while. So you come to abide within the nature of your mind for just a short while. And that state is like the sky. It never goes anywhere. The sky always is there. The difference comes from the clouds. The clouds, they come and they go. But the sky always stays. And likewise, your clear awareness always remains. Therefore, it is like the sky. So just trust in it and then just remain within its state.
When you see a lot of the a lot of the that be some cheesy. When a couple of told a woman by a dramatic marathon says, then it tatati, Homa Mebane, Holy Chana Young, Satan more shippy, the Boksha, the sun or this is more on a dog, 自己就多些。第三大了等脱离意识界的话嘞，意识界嘛，他把的，这从第三档啊，这都马上呢。但第二他上出生，我都上出生的学大过嘞，哪几个种的，哪几就马穿了，哪几就我马几不搞贴穿的，贴穿的，这上把菜没把的，你这菜把干脆见的贴穿让一个穿的肉肉嘞，的哪几学的。都切肉嘞，现场没完肉嘞。
And then cut the root of a living tree, and its hundreds of thousands of branches and leaves will wither. Likewise, by cutting the root of the mind, the foliage of samsara will dry up. The darkness of 1,000 aeons is dispelled by the light of a single lamp. Likewise, the luminous clarity of mind instantly dispels negativities and obscurations amassed over eons. So even though you have wandered in samsara since beginningless time, now when you recognize the nature of mind, then in that very moment, all karmic imprints, all negativities and obscurations will be instantly dispelled. And that is due to the power of Dharma Dhatu, your true nature. And a sign of having dispelled them is that there is full trust, confidence. So for as long as there are doubts in your mind, it is a sign of not yet having dispelled them, and therefore a sign of there still being a need to make a greater effort to develop relative bodhicitta. It is necessary really to recognize the fault of self-grasping. So for as long as there are doubts, it is a sign that we have not yet really recognized self-grasping. We are not really aware of our own self-grasping mind. And because of that, there are always doubts in our mind. Actually, the more your immeasurable love and immeasurable compassion develop, the greater they become. To the same extent, the doubts in your mind will diminish naturally. As self-grasping and doubt diminishes, also all fear and so forth will disappear. So those negativities and obscurations are dispelled. So what are these negativities and obscurations? They are actually just our afflictive emotions, and they have been there since beginningless time. And the 5 main afflictive emotions, they all arise from self-grasping. So at a time when you see the nature of mind, then all of these fixations to a self, other duality will fall apart. And if you experience this again and again, then all dualistic concepts, all grasping will collapse into the space-like nature, and then you always remain within that state. So first you see your true nature, and if you are then able to sustain that state continuously, then you will attain the state of enlightenment. Then all dualistic propensities are cleared away. And then on that ultimate level, there is no more duality then between one who accumulates karma and the karma accumulated. There is no more duality. So then you remain in the ultimate meaning. So for us, we cannot remain within that state. We can see it momentarily, but then the next moment again we become overpowered by all these afflictive emotions, and again we accumulate karma. It is just like for a moment you see it, and then again you put on your old dirty clothes, and again everything comes up again. So for this reason, for as long as we cannot sustain it, we have to make an effort and practice with diligence to habituate to that state. And so to do that, to be able to have such diligence, we first must understand its qualities. And And then if you're of lesser ability and cannot abide in this state, you should hold the key points of the winds and exert yourself in stabilizing awareness. And those of lesser ability, what really makes you be one of lesser ability is that ability is determined by the strength of your self-grasping. So the stronger your self-grasping, the lesser your ability, because the stronger your grasping at a self, the more your mind is obscured. And for this reason, you have no inner strength, no mental strength, no courage. And so for them, they should focus on those key points of the winds. And so for that, first of all, the key point of the body is the posture of sitting in a straight physical posture. And the wind mind then must be brought to the point below the navel. And also in your day-to-day activities, it is to practice the Om Ahung Vajra recitation. So basically, this is a method to bring together the winds and the mind. Because normally, the winds and the mind go separate ways. In your day-to-day activities, if you always practice the Om Ahung Vajra recitation, that is a method for your awareness to go together with the wind, to combine, to merge with the wind. And so in that way, they can merge together. And so all of the various other practices of the channels and winds, those channels, winds, and drops practices are all really methods to bring together the winds and the minds. So there is basically 2 points here. One is that in meditation, you are bringing your mind, wind to the navel, and secondly, in your day-to-day activities, you practice the Om Ahung Vajra recitation.
따뜻한 생진도 많이 방언을 받을 줄에서 따뜻한데라 내가 망보시오래 따공 잡아가는 데 태가 따뜻한데 대담지 망올라 차라리 네가 따뜻한지 그 봐요 감이 내가 이제 파다나 생부쳤다고 그래 맞들은 통에 생초박할 수 있어 너무 알아봤더니 초박할 수 있어 한순이 왔다 그래 파다 쳤다 서로 열렸다 라트라고 서로 냠냠 때리더니 뒤따와 되게 정들이 나쁘고 가래 샤도 초와지만 타들이 시합 뜻이 초와들이 장이 내도 가래는 초와들 냠을 주고 타고 그래 초와지까지도 마셔라 대체들이 방황하면 해버리지 방황하는 애들이 초와디 짓을 마셔가지고 그래서 라망도 그래 그냥 칼라도 하정한테 고독상은 어때면은 언제도 요나도 그래도 뒤로 참아 들 차고 요래 뒤를 방하는 네들 조람 탐실 내용고요 내 말이라고 따오 조람 탐실 가능할 지시도 들이대로 사지와 하정도 이제 벌써 거래 용띠 꾸지지 마 봐요 용띠 꾸지지 이좀 동반이 동도를 따라 봐요 봐 차는 뭐지 조람 탐실을 이 동등들이 이빙 로당들이 조람 탐실을 이노 이게 방황 단시 피시게 봐라 들라파디나 삼체 페바도를 하고니 조바 속치 뭐 차용을 방황은 내나들이 그걸 알아서 니게도 조람 야고 차용을 이게 차용을 되겠더니 나가 나한테 청소하고요 뒤때문에 안 받쳐들이 냠이 낭들이 메소라 더해서 니가 조람 탐실했더니 냠이 나도 기시고요 스타타타 하자 같이와리 다르벌 다다들 곰 쪼치고 나고요 그래지 저걸 가야 돼
So it says then the various gazes and methods for focusing the mind. And so now regarding the various gazes, actually I've given many instructions in the past about the various the gazes that we can practice when we practice meditation. For example, when you meditate, you can direct your gaze upward, so to directly gaze into the space in front of you and so on. So there's different kinds of gazes, but actually here there's one very important sort of different gaze here, and that is when you are mindful and conscientious, then when with eyes open you are gazing outside, while at the same time you are gazing inside to your mind. So with the eyes you are gazing outside, and with your mind at the same time you're gazing inside. So that is, as you gaze outside, that is, as you look at you see the various sense objects, the 5 sense objects, then you see those sense objects, and then while you're also looking inside at the same time, you're fully aware of the feeling that arises depending on these sense objects. So here the gaze is twofold. You're gazing outward, but also you're gazing inward at the same time. So here, as you're gazing at the various objects, you try to see what thoughts. Do I need to do something with that? What thoughts they I'm getting a little distracted here. So you see what thoughts what feelings they generate, and so then when a feeling arises, so a thought arises, then instantly in that moment you should sustain full awareness of that. And then no matter what arises, whether the feeling that arises is pleasurable or unpleasant, is pleasant or unpleasant, you should all become the same, all equal. And you should not become carried away by any feeling at all, but continue to remain within a state of awareness without becoming controlled by those feelings. And so in that way, practicing in that way, you will gain stability of awareness, which is then like a freedom of awareness. For example, then when it comes to eating food, for example, then you would be able to eat anything. You would not think that I need a certain kind of food, or a certain kind of food I can't have, and so on. Anything is fine. And that is because you are abiding within awareness all the time. So it's important that eventually in all your activities you are abiding within that state of awareness that recognizes everything that arises. So you see for yourself, that's something you can just see for yourself. Am I or am I not resting in awareness in all activities? So the Buddha had said that this mind of this heedfulness or conscientiousness, that is the basis of all good qualities to arise. Also, it is a sign of having realized emptiness. A sign of having realized emptiness is this state of mindfulness in whatever you do, in all your activities. So you're able to bring that into your day-to-day conduct, and with mindfulness, then you're able to also benefit others. You are able to refrain from causing any harm towards others entirely, and you're able to benefit them entirely. And so especially you will then be able to sustain love and compassion, and that will then be reflected in all your physical and verbal activities. So that is a sign of abiding in awareness in all your day-to-day activities. Actually, it is said that compassion is the expression, the natural expression arising from awareness. It's the natural expression of awareness. So therefore, if you really abide in awareness, you will be compassionate and kind in your activities. So also that is because when there is compassion, you will not grasp it as self. So we now take a break, and during the rest time, reflect on that, continue to practice, sustain awareness in whatever you do. That's very important to make the best use of our time, because many of you came from far away. And now during this retreat, the focus should really be on meditation.
This is not a mic, but this is just for you for your recording, so I can clip it on, right? I don't need to hold it in my mouth, because this one, when I clip it on, they have to change this to actually this is not a sound anymore. So usually the break is about 30 minutes. I want to just for just a quick
announcement for you guys, if you could do a couple of things. Again, if you haven't checked in, please do so in the bookstore. That's how you get your all-access pass bracelet that lets you eat. Also check Karma Yoga. We have one bed. We've had one cancellation, so we have one bed in the dorm that has opened up for a female. So if anyone would like to transfer from indoor camping, and it's for the duration, so someone who's go a long time, the entire teaching, please see me back in the bookstore. Again, it's for a female. And finally, I wanted to remind folks of the raffle that we have going on. The incredible hand-painted Tonka, gold leaf paint in there. It is a truly beautiful Tonka.
I have a hard time hearing you.
Each ticket is $10, 6 tickets for $50. You can purchase them in the bookstore. He's going to go back to the bookstore so that y'all can look at him more closely. And it, of course, benefits, I believe it's out in Delta. Is that right, Bob? Anyway, that's it.
loudspeaker. So it's not going to, it's amplifying through this, because it's not like a regular.
Until the end of the session. Do I need one too?
Tene, Shibate, Sangu Zawakari, Shibate, Tachu, Otatang Lete, Shilang Tation, Nana Tena, the Teleshidi, you may touch it, down at the Tima Tongoli, Jessime Tongan in Tongo, Rome Tongan in Tongo, Tela, Young Kali, touch it out, hope to touch it on him, and Thomas had touch it on the ticket in Young Church. Les tambours, les tambours, n'entend son qui s'y battait de Calais, autre délite, Calais, s'y battait. Quand c'est un con ici dans votre c'est dans les c'était un ngao n'y a pas de con les ngao n'y a pas de me vendre les啲人用隻聽咪飲得啲嘢就會呀，就諗睇啲地性啦，啲我啦，啲參加啲有人寫啲我有人。有人写的呢，他别讲那个，他哪会觉得，他的别的了他，但是我们家的这讲的人的，这搞笑的，这哪里有？但是那个现在说他就有还在朋友把钱过来，那不出的那么出的有哪的，你妈的他帮东上过来。这话刚把讲的别说话，全部的是那不到过，别人那块讲的大些，他为什么这帮个把人家，这些身边的大些，那多创个身边那边同上过，他身边那边我呢同他们对话是吧？他家里人那这个他门家里大那计划都有嘛，身边的路。这位这里是哪块当这当通了，这铁路空了，哪块到来了买的打过来去。
So this awareness that we just talked about, that awareness, that is the actual root of the mind, and that clear awareness, being that it is that is your mind, the nature of your mind, is something that you just need to decide upon. You just fully trust in. And so when you're, for example, when you die, that's the one that dies, that thinks it dies. So when you're sick, that's the one that is sick. And then when you really actually examine the nature of that awareness, now whether or not there is death and so forth, then what you will see is, you will see many qualities within this awareness, and you will see that actually there is no birth and death, and there is no coming and no going in that awareness. And then gradually you habituate to it by seeing it again and again. So actually, the gradual here is really actually important, because in the beginning, we should not expect that to be so sudden, like a sudden realization. Because if you, in the beginning, if you examine it too much, then again you will become confused. So in the beginning, first we look at those thoughts, and we then see that there is this awareness that recognizes these thoughts, and that's the awareness. And then gradually you develop trust that that's it and nothing else. And normally we don't see it because we have this concept of I, but as you sustain this seeing, this concept of the I also disappears. So it is something that you need to experience over and over again, and also in all your day-to-day activities, sustain that awareness. And then sometimes when you practice, you will be able to remain within that state for a little bit longer. And so the experience that is then gained is similar to the sky. That is why the outer example is the sky. And so here it says, when you look into, on page 23, when you look into the middle of the sky, fixed concepts of center and boundary will cease. Likewise, when mind looks into mind, thoughts cease, and you see the nature of mind. So actually, as you read through these verses on your own, then each of these verses actually is very significant. So when you read this text, you should actually recite it out loud, recite one verse, and then look at your mind. To practice with this text in such a way is really extremely beneficial. That is also how I have practiced when I was young. When my root guru Jime Doje, he gave me that text, he said that you should recite that text out loud every day. And even if you do not receive any explanation on the text, if you just recite that text, actually only through reciting the text, a very special feeling arises. And that is because the text itself is endowed with so many blessings. So you will see, it says, when the thoughts then cease, you see the nature of mind. And now we often give it different names. We call the nature of the mind different names. But when you actually see the true nature of mind, that state can actually not be given any name. It just becomes like the sky when you first see it. And then what you have seen, then that is to be habituated. So first you need to experience and see this sky or space-like nature of the mind.
별로 로바지게 타버 남카지 지가래세 비슷한데 매일 살아왔다 세고도 말이 소수 고래대 다 남카지 대처를 남카지는 타요 말이지 매일 이제 우리 타요지 거 소소랑 고태대 우리 사람들 그래요 대로 로이지 말면 남카 코는 타요매 세고도 말했더니 단대 타래 누구네 지금 소소지 지설라요 네 타래 지설서 타래 대다의 고알랑 대랑 차리들이 다 쳤어요.다네 랑 타기 시바데 그 딱히 토이세데 그 공장은 들 낭sem을 통해서는 할 딱히 야보당 들 낭sem을 쳤다 버려 그 낭sem을 따고 가다 당하게 다리 잡이 통해서는 할 딱히 땅다 달로죠 다 낭sem을 쳤다고 몇점 들이 늦게 계속 뒤보통나 들이 레터보다 나도 잘하지네 나도 가안 거래 나도 가나 자질 거래 통 쇼크버고 나도 태지지는 들이 자질 거래 바다디 지스는 나도 매셈 바잡로 요래 대참때 그때 들었더니 나도 말이 들이 초같이 보다 이거를 지념도 따고 해서
So first, in the beginning, you should first look at the mind like the sky. So first, you look at the sky and understand the sky. So when you look at the sky, then you wonder: does the sky have a center or a boundary? Are there any limits to the sky? And actually, no one can determine any limits to the sky. It is limitless. One time a disciple asked me about the center of the sky. They said, where is the center of the sky? And I was thinking about it, and my response to that question was that, no, you can think that wherever is your head, that's the center of the sky. That's how you can think about it. But what is really meant with that is that actually there is no center and there is no boundary, so it is limitless. So it is something that transcends the intellect. It is not comprehensible with the intellect, because the intellect, when we think about it, then something needs to have a limit. It goes only that far. There must be a limit. In the intellect, there are certain limitations and boundaries to anything. So it transcends the intellect, and therefore it cannot be explained in these terms as in boundary or center and so forth. So that's the first understanding to gain from analyzing the sky. So the sky, it's just endless. There is no limit to it. And then once you understand that, then you look at your mind, the awareness directly. So first you understand the sky, and then you look at your mind. So now when we meditate, Rinpoche says, I will ring the singing bowl, and you will hear this sound. And so first you analyze the sky, the outer sky, and the limitless, endless sky. And then next you close your eyes and you look at your mind, and then you hear this sound of the singing bowl. And first the sound begins with a very a loud sound. And at that time, all the concepts regarding sound, through the sound, all concepts, all thoughts are brought to an end. So first the sound is stronger, and that directly cuts through all the thinking. And then the sound gets lower and lower until it diminishes. And so together with that, think that all the thought has gone, and the mind, with the slowing down of them, the volume going down and down, the mind then becomes pervasive, like the sky. So there is no thought, and the mind is pervasive, and there is an experience, then all there is an experience of great joy, of great happiness. So that's the experience to be gained.
Tata sanam khala takje toje te ya mune tere korse ki tabje ke so sem rang sem la takje toje parjo la sanam khala takje to me yong yi je sangwe ma pa je nam khala takje to yong yo we me we de nam khala takje to yong ta je nam khala ji shi ba ta je ke sala nang tang ko nam khala ji mi shi ba de te tabje la pa ma ja nam khala ji ta me ba shi ke ha ko la la pa nang tang ko.
So first, when we look into the sky and we analyze the sky, the nature of the sky, actually, most samsaric sentient beings, when we talk about looking at the mind, actually, very few actually really see it from the perspective of the sky. So, in other words, very few actually do look into the sky and really understand the sky, the endless sky, or the space. So Rinpoche is asking you a question. So who of you really understands the nature of the sky? Who understands that the sky is endless? There's no center and no boundary to space or to the sky. So if you understand that, if you have thought about that before, then can you raise your hand?
Nam kha takje tang o nam kha thawi me ba takje tikha matang thawi takje tang nam kha te mine thawi to takje tang mine phengre te tang mo ko re ki ore gare sabat se mi ba gong shili samche ke ramjing te lamsang te ramji shaha ko te tampo sambala te ni semji tamche chabi ore semji tamche dunga chene do do chama chapter ko ore chapter te chol lamsang te ore te sangwa thong la ore te sanchok sem de long la te sanchok sem ta mandan thong khabo ore tung te je tamchen ka de lo sanchok sem ta samba sem ishiri yuzuna te lamsang ha ko to ore.
So when you really understand the nature of the sky, it is beyond. It has no center and no boundary. And there are some who have never really thought about that or looked into that. But that's actually really very beneficial to see the nature, understand the nature of the mind. And then there is others who don't even need to investigate it in that way. Those who actually develop immeasurable love, they don't even have to analyze in any way. because through love they will instantly understand the nature of the mind. Because when immeasurable love arises, this love is fully aware of all the suffering of the sentient beings in the 6 realms. So with that love, this immeasurable love, therefore pervades all of sentient beings, wherever space pervades. And then actually it is said that if you develop bodhicitta, then actually it is rather easy to understand the nature of the mind. On the other hand, if you meditate not based on bodhicitta, it is actually very difficult to see the nature of mind, because it is also said all dharma really comes down to bodhicitta. So if you have love and compassion, bodhicitta, then very quickly can you understand the nature of mind. So now we have gained some understanding on the characteristic, the nature of the sky. And so then next we look at the mind. So you will hear this sound from the singing bowl. Close your eyes, listen to that sound. And when you hear the sound, don't think there is this sound, he's ringing the bowl and so on. Don't think anything at all. And then not thinking anything at all thereafter, when a thought arises, that is fine, and if not, that is also fine. So don't follow any of the concepts. So when you hear the sound, don't think there is this sound, he rang the bowl and so on. Just directly look at the feeling, that the experience that arises that when you hear the sound, that very instant when you hear the sound. So don't think about the sound, but directly as you hear the sound, in that instant, that moment, look at the feeling that is generated. So then now through hearing the sound, in that moment when you heard that sound, and thoughts have disappeared, did you feel this thought-free mind?
대 초성나 다들 초성나 뒤감이 나도 매봤어 초성나 대라 대 초성 담아진 이거는 열대 대라리 당대 초바종도 오자들을 봐서 송도 상나야 뒤속이 집받지 장들이 공시 봐야 돼 뒤지 시바티 찍리고 가린 지나더니 그냥 지금 요래 들이들이 하고는 맞지 봐서这叫错的，没劲的，要没劲，错说马上，马错了马上，那都没个事就对了，这怎么没吧的？这还叫吵，些个人还叫吵的，还叫气不差的，吵的通了，气不通了的，后面通了啥气不通老问过的，这吵的怎么用的？这上我不记得。
So then, if you have felt that, if you have experienced now this thought-free mind, you might have this idea that I have felt it, I've experienced it. So also don't think about that. It is just the one that experiences that. That's the one that you need to see. So there, either you have not engaged in grasping and you have just experienced the sensation like generated by the sound, or even if you have actually grasped a little bit at the sound, still actually it is the same. The same awareness either is grasping or not grasping, and it is one awareness. So whatever it grasps at, it is still the same. And so knowing that, then find the way to not grasp at either. So don't hold on to either thinking I have felt it, I've experienced it, or the thought I have not experienced it. Just don't think about it in this way at all, and just remain in the thought-free mind without holding on to anything. And so what you see is very, very subtle. So it is said that, also here in the text, it says, when you see this subtleness, that which cannot be seen, that is actually like what is to be seen. So here we are being introduced to the actual experience that is generated here at this point.
대통령까지 팽그레지는 별로 살랑뛰나 남카르탄 강야 소미가야 내 밤이 에서 남카를 찌요라 남카 좀 봐도 저바들 남카 딱 보작시오 말 근데 남카 광고 딱 보작을 말 맞서 샤비들은 남카도 좀 많이 냠돼요 남들은 로고도 좀 맞직져요 말에 별나 따와대서 하고는 들이 무슨 이제 띵 감지 초라도 돼서 총도 그래 남들은 이제 조마마마 통 초라간 지요 말 뭐라도 뭐 조마도 나오래 갑들에 되는 거를 샤는 거요래 대다고 저는 또 마지나 네 밤에가 남카다 좀 많이 제밤에가 대다고 좀 많이 오나더니 파야야를 앞장 미투고 요래 대다고 좀 고차고 그래.
And so then, what is the benefit of seeing this? So it says then, when mist and clouds dissolve into the sky, they neither go nor remain anywhere. Likewise, the waves of thoughts arising in the mind subside when mind sees itself. So it is like the clouds in the sky. The thoughts arising are like the clouds in the sky. And the sky itself, it does not hold on to the clouds. The sky itself remains unaffected by the clouds. But still, they appear together. There is the sky and there is the clouds in the sky. So those who have some understanding of the view, for them it is just like they are traveling on an airplane above the clouds, the kind of feeling that arises. And so when that is understood, when you understand this cloud-like nature of all the thoughts and the nature of the mind, then all the ordinary mundane feelings will get lesser and lesser. So it is just like when you're traveling on an airplane, you look out the window, you see the cars driving around in the cities and so on, just like little ants like walking around. You're completely unaffected, and you have no, it doesn't generate a feeling in you at all. So just like that, and this is how it is when you meditate in that way, when you're not grasping at anything. When you're not grasping at thoughts, then they will not affect you in any way. Just like the cloud does not affect the sky in any way. So if you just let it beam, if you just let the thought beam, like the sky lets the cloud beam, then it will actually go away on its own. And that is the understanding to be gained here.
남도 총과 샘지람이 통데 샘지는 은혜지 다리 시바코란 거람이 통고요래 시바코란 살때면 내요는 남도데 파도나 샘 은혜지 다 남가다버리 뒤는 뵙토고요래 드니 신 남가다 난 샘고 남가니 다라오 차응에데 드니 유뭐 드니 때서 유는 소대오나 드니 sen nam kha nang sin chwa ro cha ro yo te cha pa ka le te da yang dan do zo ko me wa na ji chwa la mo yo le te da zo ko te ma ya ba te ha ko yo le sen kwang ram ji te do le sen me ji she me ba o sen ko nam kha ji she me ba yo sen ko nang ni ji she ma do zo ko de ta del da ko ji na nga wa cha da ko ja ba te ki ti kang ni ke do ko da ko ja to do da ko ja ma na simple program of three words.
So it is the awareness that transcends like everything, and that is the awareness like space that beyond coming and going and so on that need to be seen. So the nature of the awareness, the clear awareness that is here in this present moment, that is always there, vividly clear. And so first you need to understand that the mind is really just like the sky. So in the beginning, the experience is like the outer sky and the inner sky are quite similar. And then you continue to practice and you remain within that state for longer. And then gradually the experience is that the outer sky and the inner sky are actually the same. They're actually one. And then finally, the experience that arises is that you sometimes even feel that the body has completely disappeared. And that is the point where you will realize that the body is not real, that it does not actually really exist. And what remains is the natural state of the mind that transcends birth and death, just like the sky. So it is just because we identify with that body as the I, and we are with this I, this concept of me, we are holding on to that body. That is why we always encounter difficulties. So you let go of all that fixation and understand the mind that transcends the physical, the birth and death and so on.
남카 좋아요 말이야. 정말로 저토고요 말이. 되게 샘나들은 남도 오절부터 받을 차용을 까나다가 주 구심이 좋아메이지. 근데 동무마오는 되게 계속요 말이 세대로고 요래. 디 사자 심볼 계속메와디. 기와디 강리 기와 상능지리. 먹기와 거리대 단디데 유모발이. 호와를 계속니 요래. 호르드는 니는 꼬라장 요래스. 디감이 샘코는 나빠다고 자들 먹기와 말과 메베라 트리 개와요. 정말 개와요 베고 이 먹기와 요 말이지. 먹기와 타원 단디 다송선은 니요 말. 니 미송선은 호롱 주 호변이가 요 말이. 我现在哪怕那养的养的盯着旁边，这哪怕人nhìn到他们这个大街当过的。但哪怕你是个日常的，你靠有了，你哪怕你来个有的，这我发现了，这个靠你们哪怕人哪样你们都吃。这是六十斤当月上我当了，然后是个那路的当我当了，不这个是个没是个。咖喱的了，一样当样的大些当了，不只是的了，说茶生的去把的，我肉没不生气有啥的，肉没不生的，这他说肉没法吃了，上我当了，他生的这些没法的，给他干那就这么点的，这懂了的，他上街生的你没法的，通过的。然后哪怕你没往通了，等于大人你没往通，大人你没往通的是朋友身边肉你的嘛多，肉长个这个萝卜这个也个吃啥个的，当然生活那里，你这大些嘛我嘛当他这个不啦，我生活你都还没都得得了，哪怕你们呢，搞啥平常有多不多的，说生你都还没都得呢，生你没有好好说哦。老对面你都是老这个是，这哈好像咱们那个老个谁个，他是老的就把我们都说，这里咖喱出的东这个东西，是不是真咖喱太出我们这到华人上当这光的老这个的，这从我们大吃，这不能去有的，大国家要这个的，这主要的还得搞起不有的，现在搞起不有嘛的，老忙不了些有的，咱们两个的给不起你他这个送有的，你搞那个你打上也不过的，咱们那个去的这个也挺咱们的送的，刚才。工作的嘛，上班挺热些，这当地的你不热些。上班你个街头当地没把小东西，上街去把的，桥上比较多了，他把就把去讲热些。第块的样的什么，这桥上的小他开过，这是那么超好吃。这到华人就是就让我干么的，上街的到国家个东的嘞，这里面我就我搞的，给他一样马上，这样马上的，生活那路就那大街上嘛，这个那多匆匆个去接了，吃到老远的，那把没法吃了，这里两用的，第二东西也就管理些，第二拉出东西拉出，你个拉出去第二起步的，第二起步去把的，这都应该就把它好。两样得下来了，第二的吃饭没法用过的，第二的吃饭没法吃了，东西用空用了嘛，第二的吃饭有呗，这里没个这东西用没，第二的吃饭没，东西用空用嘛的，东西用空不就？到这种数据上，你没办法，我不能起码就是去送去，大的来东西他们这个哈火了，忙不了我心那多种那多可能，那你看每种来啥的那个地方来他们，这里当多年这多年我的，大你把这，大嘛这把哈火你嘛这把哈火了。那嘛这不哈嘛我呢，一样当样的你不他们就当嘛你讲呢，哈口的对不对？当嘛你嘛大把哈口的，那嘛当我就当你哈口嘛呢。
So here it says on page 24, space transcends color and form. It is changeless. So within the sky, in the space, there is no change. And similarly, thoughts cannot change your mind, the nature of your mind. It always remains as it is. So it cannot be changed by any thought of virtue or non-virtue. And that is now, when we practice Mahamudra, there is no more concept of virtue or non-virtue. So generally speaking, what is virtue are those thoughts of love and compassion. And non-virtues are the concepts of self-grasping and the afflictive emotions. And for as long as there is samsara, for as long as we perceive a duality, there is virtue and non-virtue. For as long as there is a duality, we will wander around in samsara. And so when you, now here in this context, when you really settle in the space-like nature of the mind, the state of Mahamudra, then there is no more concept here of virtue and non-virtue. It is a state where self-grasping has become purified and there is no more perception of a duality of self and other. There is no more, there is no one any longer who wanders in samsara, and there is no samsara that one wanders in. There's no more duality. Here you're resting in the pervasive space-like nature of the mind. So first you need to understand the space-like nature of the mind. And then next you look into the sky itself and you analyze, is there duality, a division somewhere in the sky? And you find that there is no duality. So then who has created all of these dualistic perceptions? So now, for example, when you have, you look at two windows, you look outside, you have two windows, so it seems like there is you see two skies when you look at the two windows. But then when you open up and you really go outside, then there's only one vast sky, and there never has been two skies. There is no duality in the sky. So now thinking about the nature of the sentient beings in the 6 realms and looking at your own mind, what is the difference between my own mind and the mind of a little insect, for example? Actually, when you really look into it, you see that our mind is exactly the same. There is no difference. And on the basis of that understanding, you also understand that there also are beings without a body then. And all beings have that same mind. And that mind is beyond birth and beyond death. And so here it says in the text then, so your own mind is beyond color and form and unstained by the light and dark phenomena of good and evil. And so from the ultimate perspective, it is taught that Buddhas and sentient beings are not separate. And that is what you will ultimately realize. And so to realize that, first you need to understand that there is no duality within space. And then once you have understood that, then gradually you will also begin to understand that there is no duality between self and other. It is just that there seems to be a duality because we perceive duality in form, or just like different branches on a tree. And so if you if you analyze others, then it seems that there is a great variety. What you see is a duality appearing in different ways. But if you first understand that within the sky there is no duality, then next you will also understand that there is no duality in the minds of, for example, humans and an ant, an insect, for example. For example, it is just like different sources of light. Like you have two lamp flames, but the light that is produced is the same. It is the same light. In this world, many things are done with this energy, with this light energy, but then in the end, there's only one underlying energy source that powers them all. So it is just like that. So slowly you understand that there is this one underlying source that powers it all. And so this is what you slowly begin to understand as you continue to practice. And so here in this context, that is called the analytical meditation. And so meditate in that way, and if if doubts arise, you can also, for example, ask Garchen Rinpoche, who is here. That's an excellent opportunity. You can ask him questions. It's good to clear away your doubts in the mind. And then also, that is, you should really actually make no division between the different spiritual teachers and what they say, because they all ultimately teach the same thing, the Dharma. So have a pure perception and think that not just the Dharma, but all the religions in the world are actually one. On the relative level, the Dharma teaches to develop love and compassion, which is the antidote to self-grasping. So if you have love, you will not grasp at a self. And when there is no more self-grasping, that is the final fruition of enlightenment. It is when the ice block has completely melted into water and merged one with the ocean water. So that is a point to really bring to mind again and again. And then how can we melt the ice block? It is through the accumulation of merit here on the relative level. So that's the first thing to understand. So then it's important to hold on to love and compassion in all your day-to-day activities. And then when you come to actual meditation, like here, then there is nothing to think about at all. Then you don't think about virtue and non-virtue at all. You just directly look at the mind, and all the small thoughts, the subtle thoughts that arise, they dissolve on their own, just like a wave subsiding back into the water and not affecting you in any way, in one or the other way. So that's the experience to be gained here. It is that eventually you realize that happiness and suffering, it's all the same. So you will just naturally let go of all attachment to pleasure, happiness, and the aversion against suffering. Everything becomes the same. Happiness and suffering both are lost in a way. They're all the same. And what remains then is a state of great bliss. It is because you have realized that this experience of pleasure or happiness and suffering is illusory by nature. It's just an illusion. So that's the experience to gain here. It is not to be attached to whatever arises. So it is that because we are attached to pleasure, to happiness, that we always run into suffering. Actually, if you're not attached to happiness, then there is no basis for any suffering to arise at all. It is only because we attach to happiness that we experience suffering. And so who has created all of that? The experience of happiness and suffering and so on. It is created by our own afflictive emotions and our belief in their reality, our grasping at the reality of what we perceive. And if for as long as we grasp and hold on to that, karma is ripening. And so then in the future, when you realize that it is all just a thought and you realize there is no self and other, then there is also no more karma to ripen, because there is no more self from which it can ripen. And then if you always continue to remain within that state, then you finally realize the ultimate truth, the emptiness. You realize that ultimately self and other do not actually exist. So first you actually realize that a self does not really exist. And when you realize that, then you also understand that others don't exist. Anything else also doesn't really exist separately. And until then, you need to reflect on that again and again. You understand the empty nature of things because things are compounds and therefore they are empty. It is because they are impermanent. And in that way, gradually realize that there is no self. But until you have realized that there is no self, you cannot really realize emptiness.
마통모도 다 통하고래 삼고요래 해서 이체니 그 말이 배는 대별했더니 니만 저가봐 통고는 바가 답답해요 많이 니만 가진 통을 이거래 배제인들이 랑 생각 내록제 코르 생기한테 유나 라기 와대 초라던 거야 말이지 맨 또 치와를 때나 들이 raptam이오리 잠진하나 로나마 버튼이 요리 따뜻하게 충충 쳐있다는 심지탄들 파티는 거니 상회되고 미전에 심지 장외 버튼이 심지 이제 눈바도 뭐 차로야 됐다 요나야 이 탐지의 심대신 정보도 요리 이 탐지 냠도 사지수지 냠도 요리 다다들이 니들 냠도 요리 시바데 강리 거기 심대신 정보도 초라로야 말 내가 박차지 상통이 이제들 초라로야 말에서 kapag kore department so.
And so then some see it, and those who see it, then they know I've seen it. And then there is others who think they do not see it, and they feel that it's so difficult to see. But if you feel that way, you should not lose heart. Do not give up. You can see it because it's there, just like the sun is always there. So as the brilliant, clear essence of the sun is not obscured by the darkness of 1,000 aeons, so too the luminous essence of mind cannot be dimmed by aeons in samsara. So whenever you see it, it's there, and it is always there, unobscured. It disappears. And so when you look at samsaric sentient beings, they actually have that mind too. They have that nature. It is always naturally there, and no matter where they go, this nature, their Buddha nature, it never becomes defiled or spoiled, or it's never lost in any way. It's always there. For example, when you look into the animal realm, in the waters, for example, there is some animals that are huge, like mountains, and then there is some animals in the waters that are as small as like little water particles, tiny animals. So when you look at all of these many sentient beings, then really a feeling of love and compassion arises just naturally. And then when you look at all of these limitless beings, it almost could make you crazy. It's overwhelming. But still, even though it seems so overwhelming, they all have Buddha nature. And therefore, that means that the Buddha is always with them, never separate from them. And that is why we always say those who tame and those to be tamed are actually together. It is because they all have the same Buddha nature that never becomes spoiled or is lost in any way. And whenever their karmas and their karmic imprints become cleared away, then that basic fundamental nature that has always been there reveals itself, and it has never changed.
Filipino namka rapta jan namka landra jude mes then you said namka la yomi inga mengdo tokome doas mengda ya madoas then you that sem na then rang sem bo thong te la o se rang thong sa thong te ma thong te le teni meng jo me ba yomi jo me ba rang shi choa yo ba yili jude me ba ras.
And then it says, though you may say that space is empty, space itself cannot be expressed in this way. Likewise, though you may say that the nature of mind is luminous, there is no basis for labeling it through any such expression. So what this verse is to say that, when you look at the mind, at the sky, the outer sky, first, you cannot express it, you cannot describe it, give it any name at all. You cannot speak of the sky in terms of like in an affirming or negating way. So that is the sky. And then when you look at the mind, you see the mind clearly, and yet you cannot express it in any way. You cannot call it a name or label it or put it. You can't put it into words. You cannot speak of it in terms of a thing that exists or doesn't exist, and so on. So this is saying that it is a personal experience, a feeling that you yourself will experience. So that that is all there is. It can only be experienced oneself.
bên nam kha khang kang ti nam kha selen ma tin ki mo to nam kha par tin re mani nam kha selen tin go ma ti ka ma tin de nang yu de ni rang sem te ka re ne do ka re tin do ta ro sem te na ki da le chen ti so le lu te la ta tin do sang hu yo ma re le ta tin ti me ta chi tang ta ti do ga ma do tel yang de tak che tang o le po do ko te tam de ma ta pa ko bo ka ni te le la ma ti se yo la ma ti sa la ma ti nam la ma ti sa la ma ti sam ka yang ma ti ba re te so ko sha tak che tang na ke ho le mo se ma le ti do ya le ti do de na le de ni sa ni ko te sam de za le ko ta ko le te ke ta sang 도저히 안 해봐. 그냥 막디 막디 내가 뭐 제가 내 손자와 손 들이 도착지 동을 방금 막지 봐. 강용하고 말이지. 방금 내가 간 내용하고 말이지. 요요래야 선랑 잠마도 들이 가로 좀 미로 좀 싸워대. 근데 여기 제가도 어떤 처되나 돌나 나가 하고는 적시 딱지 마땅스만 뭐
And then in space, what depends on what? Likewise, your own mind, Mahamudra, has no supporting ground. So in space does not depend on anything. So we depend on space as ordinary beings now, but space does not depend on anything, does not depend on anything to exist. And so when you then look at your mind, how really does the mind exist? And where really is the mind actually? So when we look at the sentient beings of the 6 realms in samsara, they appear that way because first they cling to the existence of a self, and that creates their karmic bodies. And they believe that this is who they are, this is true, and that they rely on these bodies. But that's actually not true. And you have to understand that you have to really analyze the nature of your body again and again. The body, you will lose this body eventually. That we learn already when we reflect on impermanence, that we don't really rely on the body actually, or a physical object, or earth, or the sky, or anything at all. So this is how we can understand it. And then since the body is impermanent, then now when we look at the mind, now what does the mind rely on? It may appear to us that the mind depends on the body or relies on the body. But actually, for example, when you're sleeping at night and you're dreaming, the body sleeps, but the mind may go around the entire world and do all kinds of things. So it is quite strange, actually. So then you realize maybe the mind does not depend on the body. Actually, it doesn't depend on anything at all. And this is where we understand then that the mind does not arise. It is free from arising, abiding, and cessation. So first, we cannot determine where it arises from. It is unarisen. It has no origin. So secondly, it does not abide anywhere. So you may wonder, where is it now? Where is the mind? So it's there, and there is this clarity that's there, but that's all there is. There's just some clarity without a location, a place where it abides. And then thirdly, it is also without cessation. It will never cease to be and continue to experience and engage in various activities of samsara and nirvana. So that is in brief sufficient for us to understand here at this point, and also there is no need to analyze all of that too much.
那个革命，他娘亲光复革命，什么新发展情况，我怕他们早下红油，我甚至刚个地头，我越来越地头，越来地头，越大人你的那种，他现在了新的哦。 就给杀了七八年的，这一个身份差不多的，这顶头的，这顶让我有没得，他有些从那么大把，他这里顶他东西的就都上，这里还搞这里，生活上一直讲了要毛顶把这里，这什么块也怕了有的，这什么块这是要掐了这里，就不掐个有的，什么人的东西的，没这个东西没有，生活上些的东西没有，这说话的当。 还活过来，这几天啊，这他们说家，这里叫他们他们去了，这里好多的地方去我们家，这哪个偏哪，这哪个偏的什么，也还没人去叫去到嘛，我们人叫旁边，这么说的呢，常我们的，都是这烧饭菜儿，这他我们做的，们就是山上的药渣药的，给你那边烧饭菜儿这我们真的我们的，我们。 家的一直上的的，我做上街的这把钱我们家个嘞，什么做过的嘛都累，搞起我有么的。
And so then, when we actually engage in practice and meditation, through abiding in that state, then you will clearly see the nature of what binds you, and what you're attached to. So when we investigate what depends on what, and this is where you will really clearly see your own attachments and your fixations. So that is because here you are looking at what do I really rely on? What do I really depend on? What does my mind rely on? So normally you may think that I rely on many things. I rely on my body, and I also rely on outer objects, on people, family and friends. I depend on them. I rely on them. And so here, when you look into that here, you will recognize the attachment to the people and objects and your body and so on of this life. And this attachment is just like adding earth or dirt into the water, making it muddy. And then, even though you think you rely on some, do you really have any freedom at all? Actually, you have no freedom at all. Everything is impermanent. Everything compounded is impermanent. And when you see that, you realize that it is because of that, because of my believing that I have to rely on someone or something, or depend on someone or something, that is why I suffer. And actually, my mind does not depend on anything at all, because it is like the sky. And when you see that clearly, the experience is just like you're like bursting into the sky and become one with the sky, and the experience is very blissful and happy. So you realize basically that if I grasp, I suffer. And if I do not grasp, then I do not suffer. Because the natural state of the mind is naturally without any suffering at all. There is no suffering in the mind. So that feeling is something that you need to experience yourself. So now we take a break, and in your activities, continue to practice like the Om Mahung Vajra recitation or just meditation. And also, again, do not always get up when I enter the room or leave the room. Also, there is no need to prostrate in every session. Actually, meditation is most important now, so don't prostrate every beginning of every session. depression. Actually, that creates a lot of trouble, annoyance for everybody else. So don't prostrate, don't get up, but practice and meditate. And actually, meditation is the mind prostration. That's the best prostration. It is when you really develop devotion, faith in the three jewels, in the Buddha, and you meditate. Because as the Buddha had said, when we speak of liberation, the mind must become liberated and not the body. So the body is not so important.
Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum.
Okay, stay tuned. We have some important announcements. So before you see that nature and burst into the bliss and disappear, definitely have some things you need to know. And, Rinpoche has told us to, look into the sky like nature. Well, there's no better place to do it than here, Look around, day or night, amazing sky. So a few important announcements. First and foremost, we're going to need to stagger lunch. Okay, so we'll be staggering the lunch, more to tell you in just a second. But first of all, we need to tighten up the parking in the lower lot. So if more people need to fit in. So if you're parked down in the lower lot, please go down between 1 and 2 to where you're parked, and Jake will help you. They need to rearrange that. Also, a must-move vehicle, and you can see the office. It's a Colorado plate, EHQ417. Sounds like bingo. Could be the bingo announcer. It's a silver Toyota Sienna van. So you must move, and they said to see the office. I'm not sure, check into that. One bed available for a female in the absolutely beautifully refurbished, beautiful Tashi house. It is a silent space, just so you know. See the office. No open cups in the temple or in the stupa. Closed bottles only. Closed containers, please. So lunch, half of the room is going at 12. So we're not staggering like an hour, just only a half an hour. And that way you won't have to wait in line. And the other half, 12:30, so that by the time the 12:30 people come, the